All right, in this video, we are going to take a look at the other Final Four game, South Carolina versus Texas, or as I like to think of it, I call it Rocky. Take out the Y, Rock 4. Yes, this is likely to be a rock fight as these teams know each other so well. And I will go through the matchups, but they're pretty darn obvious if you haven't watched the previous three games. But we'll go through them, and then at the end, I'll just go through some odds and ends so far from the press conferences as well. Talk a bit Olivia Miles. I'll tell you the top five teams, in my opinion, where she will be going and my justification for that, and three or four teams where I just don't see her going. So anyway, before we start, if you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. All right, here we go. Let's get into it. So degenerate corner, Texas, or no, sorry, South Carolina is minus 5.5, and the over-under is 124.5. So obviously these teams have played three games. In the first game, South Carolina handed it to Texas 67-50. What stood out was Madison Booker just couldn't hit anything. She was 3 of 19. The other thing that stood out to me, even though Texas won the rebounding battle, they overall shot so bad from the floor. I think it was around 29%. Then the rematch was at Texas, and they beat South Carolina 62-66. A much closer game. Booker got back on track, 7 of 22. And then the third and final one that was, well, if you talk to Vic Schaefer, that was a home game for Carolina, but in the SEC Conference Championship, Texas went down to South Carolina 64-45. And once again, Booker struggled, going 4 for 13 for 10 points. The other thing was they had a horrendous second quarter, and that's really where they lost the game, 6-21 in that second quarter. And that's one of the problems I wonder about Texas. If they get down by a lot of points or South Carolina goes on a run, that's where they're really vulnerable, because it's almost like a running football team that can't pass the ball. If they get out of it, it's hard for them to get back into it because they're not a big three-point shooting team. They're not a Tennessee that'll take 15 to 20 three-point shots and they can have a quarter where they totally get back into it, or like an Oklahoma where you just never think they're out of the game. You always sort of have to keep the gas on. Versus Texas, you get them down, they really have to fight and claw and play a lot of defense to get back into the game. So because these teams have played three times, there's no mystery in the matchups. Essentially, South Carolina is wanting Bree Hall to get into Madison Booker and make her inefficient. If they slow down or make Madison Booker inefficient, it's going to be really, really hard for Texas to win. On the other side, Texas wants to get Fagan and Kitts into foul trouble and really abuse them on the offensive boards, get second looks, in addition, limit their turnovers so South Carolina can't get fast break points and go on runs. And they all said it in the press conference. These teams know each other so well. It's really going to be who executes better. All of the majority of the ESPN experts, they're going with South Carolina. The spread obviously favors South Carolina, and that's, in a lot of ways, that's because the margin's so small for Texas. If they have a bad run, like we said before, it's going to be hard for them to get back into the game, versus South Carolina could be down and get back into it. The one concern for South Carolina is their offense hasn't looked great during the tournament. They looked a little bit better in the third quarter versus Duke. Pow got off on a few picks and sort of they did enough to get there, and that's the key point. Staley keeps on saying, hey, any win's a good win, but Texas made TCU look so ugly in terms of their stifling defense. Could Texas shut down South Carolina? That would be the concern for South Carolina. But really, it's just two great defensive teams going at it. And I think most feel South Carolina will win. But again, there is an angle for Texas to win. Either one of these teams wins, it wouldn't be a real surprise to me. I expect South Carolina to win. But as always, that's why they play the game. Throw the ball up and see what happens. I would stay away from this because it's going to be so ugly, and these teams know each other so well. In terms of wild cards, those unexpected players that you might just get extra points from, for South Carolina, it's pretty obvious. Full Wiley could go off. Edwards could go off. Tessa Johnson, if they get into transition and she's able to spot up, she can kill you from three. So those are the ones Texas would be keeping their eye on. And if you're a fan, that's what you're worried about. You don't want those three players to get on a hot streak because single-handedly any one of those players can take you down. For South Carolina, Harmon will get her points probably from getting to the elbow, and you really, as I said before, you don't want Booker to get her points. Shea Holly, yeah, they'll make sure they have somebody on her. I don't see Shea Holly killing them. Famous last words. She'll probably have a career game now. That's like, who was it, Carson for LSU? But the other one that South Carolina really would have their eyes on would be Oldacre and obviously Jones killing them on the board. So that's the real area South Carolina wants to make sure they don't get killed on the offensive boards. In terms of a pick, yeah, I'm going South Carolina. I'm not calling for the upset here. I think South Carolina will get Texas. In terms of the spread, the only thing that makes me nervous is if Texas really mucks up this game and it's a bit closer than the 5.5. But if forced into a corner and had to make a pick, yeah, I would take South Carolina to cover the 5.5. Now, give me your comments. Do you think I'm right or I'm wrong in terms of my pick? I will talk about a few other things. The press conferences were on. I thought all the teams were really good, really interesting. They all seem loose. I thought South Carolina was the funniest. I liked Raven Johnson and Tahina Pow, and I like Staley as well. But I like all the coaches and everybody. But yeah, that the thing that stuck out to me during it was they were asking them about the TV money, and Don Staley saying that the women need to get a separate TV deal. I agree with Staley, and as well, I agree with Gino Auriemma. He's like, it's probably not a bad idea, but if you're going your separate TV deal, like dividing the men's and women's contract, then you've got to be prepared to get less, and you're not necessarily going to get what you think you're worth and build it up. But at the same time, but he didn't say it was a bad idea. At the same time, I agree with Staley saying, money talks and the women's game needs to stand on its own. And with the viewership they get, it would. I think that would be a good idea. The other gripe, which I mentioned in an earlier video, was Gino Auriemma. They talked about the new coach on the rules committee, I think it is, Fernandez from Florida. I can't remember the school, but he was saying, yeah, he'll get in his ear regarding the schedule and maybe should the games be pushed up a week earlier. And he just sort of talked about the ridiculousness of the travel schedule. Didn't say in exact terms, but essentially how UConn had to go to Oregon and then, or not Oregon, but to Spokane. And then after that, fly back to UConn and then to Tampa. And he's like, it's the biggest game of the year, and we've had to do all this travel. He didn't go on and on about it. He just sort of hinted to that, and I agree with it. It that should be fixed up. And again, if they're going to stick to the two regional system, then the regionals, at least one of them should be in the middle of the country. So one team's just not forced to travel all over the country. And then a common sense approach that if they're, like, it would have been better if UConn was playing the day before so they would have more time to travel versus UCLA that had the first game. I know the number one seeds always get the first game, but if you're going to have a two regional system and some of the teams are going to have to do more travel, and you have to use a little bit more common sense and say, tradition dictates the one seed always plays first, but not a big issue. In terms of the last thing, Olivia Miles and what team she's going to go to, I've got a few for this. So I've just done my 1 to 5. I've heard a lot of speculation on this. I think it's pretty clear to me the obvious team I think she would go to is, I'm thinking USC. It just seems so perfect to me on paper. Juju's out next year, and she's the perfect stopgap player. You assume she wants to leave Notre Dame to get more ball, because I just can't believe that she wouldn't have gotten NIL opportunities at Notre Dame. So I think she wants to really display her full game and show what she can do. And you know that USC is the best place to do that, because Lindsey Gottlieb will showcase players. I mean, look at Juju's usage rate was always over 30%, and with Miles, she would fit right into that. That would be their star player to see them through till Juju gets back. That's I think it has to be USC. A close second would be Duke, because ACC school. She knows the ACC, and they have all the parts. They just need one more player, like a scoring threat of a player. She'd be the perfect fit, like they've got with Akanawa and Fournier and Donovan. She would just slot right in that team. That would be a very, very nasty team to play. Dark horse, real dark horses. I've got two for those. I would say Kentucky. I mentioned that in the previous video just because of Kenny Brooks and how he managed Amore. He's a good players coach. Could it, I seriously doubt it. Could they come up with a big NIL deal because it's Kentucky and really trying to get in the game? Potentially, that, if she's looking really to get paid, could Kentucky come up with a good NIL deal? The other one, maybe Oregon, maybe some of the Phil Knight money. I really doubt that. That's a dark horse. And then the final one that could happen, probably less of a dark horse than those two, would be Notre Dame. She's not forced to. She can always go back to Notre Dame. I'm sure Niele Ivey would take her back with open arms and say, yes, come back home. Yeah, you were just going to explore your options, which I totally appreciate, but now you're back at Notre Dame. I don't see it happening. Again, very, very dark horse candidate, but you never know. You really never know. And then in terms of ones I don't see, I know people in the chat have mentioned UConn. I don't see her going to UConn. I just don't see her fitting UConn system or what they want. Same thing with LSU. I do not see LSU. The last one, Texas. I don't see her going to Texas. Harmon still hasn't said if she's returning or not, but I don't see her coming back to going to Texas. I see Harmon returning, and I just don't see her to be a fit at Texas. The last one is with LSU. Johnson has said Flau'jae Johnson is coming back, and she hasn't announced she's going into the portal. So presumably Flau'jae Johnson's returning to LSU, but I still don't see Miles going there. I do think they'll be active. I see them more likely to get Latson from Florida State. I know that South Carolina, supposedly, some of their players were talking about Latston, that they'd played with her. I think it was Raven that said they'd played with her and come here, but I don't see her going to South Carolina. If she does, then not Flau'jae, but I would say Malaysia Fulwiley needs to transfer out if they bring in Latson. But anyway, those are my main thoughts in terms of Olivia Miles. Again, put down where you think. Do you think, like me, USC is the number one candidate, and then Duke? It's clear in my mind, but tell me what you think in the comments as well. Do you have Texas to win tomorrow or South Carolina? I've got South Carolina covering the spread in terms of the matchups afterwards, and that's one of the things with the tournament. It's all about matchups. I think UConn, if UConn beats UCLA, I think they match up well with South Carolina and Texas. I think South Carolina would be more dangerous for UConn just because it's hard to play a team a second time. And obviously, South Carolina wants their revenge. Texas, I just don't see any way. Texas could muddy up the game, but I just think UConn would have too much firepower for Texas for that to happen. If UCLA gets through, I think the more dangerous team for UCLA if they beat UConn is Texas. I think Texas matches up really well versus UCLA. They can muck things up with their guards. They've got Oldacre and Jones could play tough on bets, and that would be a tough game for UCLA. I think UCLA would rather play South Carolina, but once again, much like UConn, South Carolina, trying to beat them 2 times in a year, that's not a real fun proposition, which Texas might find out about yesterday or tomorrow. So, anyway, those are my thoughts on the future matchups, but we'll talk about those. I will try to do a live stream after the UConn game and just take questions and talk about the game really because I'm really excited about these 2 games tomorrow and just want to go live and discuss them with you guys. Anyway, once again, leave all your comments, your poison. All comments are welcome. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great night.